Hello and welcome to Close Calls on the 42.e, brought to you in association with Air Sport. You know the scale at this stage. Every Friday we look ahead to the biggest sporting event of the weekend, and we dial up the hottest pundits in the game to help us to do so. This weekend it is all about the Champions Cup. Once more, my name is Gavan Casey and I'm joined in 42 Towers by Ryan Bailey. How are you, Ryan?
Gav, good, yeah. Recovering from last night.
No, let's say nothing about last night. We are a little bit worse for wear after the 42 Christmas party, or the Journal Media Christmas party. We're going to persevere. We have a man to help us do that. It is Johne Murphy, the perfect man to talk to us about Munster and Leicester in particular, and the rest of the fixtures as well. Johnny, how are things?
Good, all good, thankfully.
You're a little bit sleep deprived yourself, Johnny, which made us feel a little bit better about ourselves.
Yeah, a small bit. My wife had twins about 12 days ago, so little boy George and little girl Molly, so they're all home now, so all going well. But yeah, as I was saying to you offline, it's our 18-month-old AJ that's causing all the trouble. But yeah, look, we'll get sleep in a few years. It'll be fine.
Excellent, and congratulations to you again, Johnny. I don't know if you're going to see the rugby over the weekend, but we might kick off with Leicester and Munster. It probably is the biggest game of the weekend, given that there's a lot on the line for both teams. A lot of talk during the week as well from Matt O'Connor, who's kind of made Andrew Conway out to be a bit of a, I don't know, it's drumming up controversy where I don't really know if there is any, and it's like maybe taken away from the fact that his team were definitely second best last weekend. What are your thoughts ahead of Welford Road this weekend?
Well, like, you know, Matty is Matty. I played under him for 2 or 3 years over in Leicester. You know, he's not shy of giving him his opinion on anything. That's the way he is inside rugby. It's the way he is outside rugby. He's a pretty straight shooter. So, you know, if he feels a bit aggrieved by something, he's going to say it. And I think that's probably what led to his probably downfall in Ireland. And the fact that he probably took on Joe and, you know, David Newsford in terms of the availability of the internationals. And probably that was what was probably his undoing at the end. You know, I think there probably is a small bit of what he's saying in terms of possibly refereeing decisions. You know, Munster were smart. Whether they were cynical or not, I'm not sure. Because, you know, Leicester themselves can probably err on that side too, in terms of if they play the referee correctly. So. Yeah, I think the Andrew Conway stuff, I think he's just probably annoyed that, you know, he's going to be missing Vianu for kind of a period of time. But, you know, that was a collision. Yes, technically it was to Vianu's head, but, you know, Andrew gets knocked out because he hits him with his head. So it's a head clash. It's a mistake. It's, you know, it's kind of one of these things that just happens in rugby. There's no malice, there's no intent. So I think that side is probably, yeah, he's just drumming up stuff to probably try and get a reaction from his players, because, you know, speaking to a couple of guys in the backroom staff, they felt their boys were soft. So, you know, they're certainly going to be calling them out individually and collectively behind closed doors. And this is probably a way of trying to say, you know, publicly, look, lads, you know, you didn't do your job, and I think that's probably what he's trying to do there. Big time.
From the Munster perspective, Johnny, I mean, we obviously, the two teams have played each other an awful lot over the last few years, and throughout the history of this competition, or all variants of the competition. Like, if you go back to last year, Munster dominated Leicester at home as well, and when they went across to England, they were beaten up really physically as much as anything, and it was a close game. Munster were maybe a little bit unlucky with the penalty at the end, but how do they ensure that doesn't happen this time round? And also, I suppose, Leicester are playing for something this time, which is their future in the competition this year. So presumably it is going to be a close game, but how do Munster sort of rediscover their dominance from last weekend?
I think they just have to go about their game the exact same way. They have to err on that side in terms of, you know, the legal line at the breakdown, and they have to try and dominate that area. You know, I think it's a case that if they can meet, you know, if they can get priority in that area, you know, parity in that area, I think they're probably in for a good day. Welford Road has the history that Thomond Park does, so the crowd are going to be probably on their backs, and that so it might not be as an easy ride in terms of that Munster had this week. But I think they need to get that physical, and they need to do what they've always done, and that's win the air. They get Murray putting up the box kicks, getting up in the air, controlling the air and getting that momentum, because that can suck the life out of teams, suck the energy out of it. You saw what happened Exeter last week, when Jack Noel came on and he dropped 2 or 3 balls, and all the energy just goes from a team. So they have to get their basics in terms of what their pillars are as a team and what their coaching staff want. That's defensively, breakdown, win the air. If they can do that, then they can really, really push forward this weekend.
Absolutely. Ryan, a couple of changes to the Munster team?
Yeah, cool. Obviously in fours, Conway's gone, so handy enough to bring Darren Sweeten in. Obviously he had a great November, he's been in great form. But I think the huge loss is Reece Marshall at hooker. I mean, he had an outstanding game last week. He was everywhere. So energetic, tireless, so dynamic. He kind of reminds me a bit of Sean Cronin as well. He gets around the pitch very easily, a great athlete. So he's obviously a huge loss. And Kevin O'Byrne coming in for his first European start, that's a huge occasion for him. But as Johnny was saying there, I think Munster need to replicate what they did last week. I think obviously Andy Farrell worked wonders with them over the last fortnight. He's been down in Limerick a couple of days working on their defence. They've kind of insisted that he hasn't changed much. The structure and their offence has been the same, but last week they just got it spot on. They were so aggressive with their line speed. Scannell and Arnold in midfield set that tone early on. They made a few big hits, denied forward, and Ben Young's time and space, and that just led to Leicester's inaccuracies really. Like Matt O'Connor used the excuse that of the breakdown, but Munster were so quick up and they didn't let them settle, and that kind of led to Leicester's inaccuracy. So yeah, same again from Munster, but as we've been saying, it's pretty difficult to replicate that again.
Absolutely, particularly over in England. Now obviously there is a repeat of the other 2 fixtures as well for the Irish provinces, and they got on well last weekend, and you'd expect, I think, okay, Exeter are an excellent team, you'd expect Leinster to repeat their feat at home. You probably would expect also to get the job done against a Harlequins team that have nothing to play for in the competition. Johnny, we might start with Leinster. How impressed were you by that by that victory last weekend against an absolutely superb outfit? If it was an acid test, Leinster passed it, and they looked like serious contenders now for this competition.
Yeah, they were very clinical, and they, I'd still be in contact with a lot of guys that I played with over there, and they were really looking forward to Exeter kind of showing Europe what standard, that they were the standard bearers for English rugby, and I think it's something that probably the whole Premiership has probably took a bit of a hit for. They're unsure what the quality is like after that, because they're kind of stunned a small bit. And that's just down to how Leinster played. They brought an intensity, and they just looked so comfortable in what they did. Back to when, Joe Smith was in charge, you knew what you were going to get with them, but they all just looked so comfortable on the ball, and they were just clinical. And they did what Exeter have done to teams over the last 18 months in the Premiership, hold the ball for long periods of time, and when they got into 22, they scored. Exeter are going to be hurting though this weekend, so I'm not sure how, if they underestimate them at all. I think there's going to be a big backlash there. I do expect Leinster to get a job done, but I think weirdly it might be a small bit closer. Exeter they were completely flustered. It was like, as I said already, Noel came off the bench as a British Lion. He dropped 2 or 3 balls in the air when there was no one around him. And it's those basic things that you would be guaranteed that Exeter would do every week in, week out in the Premiership, that they just lacked last week. And I think they're going to be hurting, and they owe themselves a performance. I don't think the result is probably going to go their way, but I think it's going to be a cracker of a game. Noel starts, Lockie Turner comes in at 15, he's a class outfit, and I think it's going to be a bit tighter, but I do expect Leinster to get the job done in the end. Yeah,
Ryan, I mean, again, it was a hugely impressive performance by Leinster last weekend. I dare say, if that fixture had taken place last year, Leinster might have been on the wrong side of things in terms
Sure,
of the result. What have you been impressed by this year in terms of where they've moved their game on?
Sure, I think like Stuart Lancaster always speaks incredibly well, but I think his point on Monday was that the most pleasing aspect of it, he was hurt. He was frustrated by the try they conceded, number one. Out of all the positives from that game, the first thing he said was that try. He was so frustrated by it, even 24 hours after the game. I'm sure that's been kind of one of the focuses this week. But just from the positives, there were so many of them. But it was a different kind of Leinster performance. They went there, they strangled Exeter, they silenced the crowd. That 44 phase of possession before the match-winning try. That was huge. So it was a different kind of Leinster performance. They won in a different way than we're normally used to seeing them playing. And as you said at the start there, that's a huge statement of intent. Like wins against Montpellier and Glasgow in the first two rounds, a great start. But you go away to the English champions, a ground like Sandy Park. They hadn't lost there in 12 months, and you do a job on them like that. And as Johnny said, do a job on them, what they do to every other team that goes there. Hugely impressive, and just the depth they have. Obviously they've only made one change this week, which is enforced, but you feel that Leo Cullen is now able to really pick his strongest suit, his strongest team at the moment, and that's puts them in such good stead. Like they've just got so many players that they can choose from. You think of James Lowe, not even involved again this weekend, starting guys like Jordan Larmour who can come in, just they can fit in seamlessly. They're in really good shape, but as I point out, and as they've done, they're only halfway through. And 4 years ago, I think it was, they beat Northampton at Franklin's Gardens, put in an unbelievable performance, kind of similar to what they did at Sandy Park last weekend, and they were beaten by Northampton at the Aviva, and that made them go. I think it was Toulon in the quarter-final, so that changes the whole complexion. So I think they're fully aware of that, but as Johnny said, I think they'll get the job done again tomorrow. Absolutely.
We'll get your predictions in a moment, lads, but before we wrap up, Ulster, Johnny, I suppose, look, they got the job done themselves last weekend, and it's been a problem for Ulster for the last 3-4 years, maybe longer, that word consistency that people mention, and it's like even speaking to people like Stephen Ferris, they're unbelievably frustrated that this team can sort of put a sequence of results together. This is an opportunity maybe to kickstart something like that and get 2 solid wins against a decent Premiership side, and also keep yourself alive in the Champions Cup. Do you reckon they're well prepared to do that?
Yeah, I think so. I think last weekend, the first half, the conditions were just so horrific that they just ground out a performance. They just got their heads in that we're here, we're going to do a job. No matter how bad it is, the conditions, we're here to do a job. And I think Harlequin's kind of soft underbelly shone through. I think their reaction the previous week when they beat a Saracens team that are probably on their knees to a certain extent, it was like they'd won the Premiership when they did 3 or 4 years ago. So that kind of shows you where their mentality's at. And last week, I just think they kind of had, they went for the hills a small bit. So I think if Ulster can get stuck into them early, just get in that doubt, that Quinn's underbelly, that soft undercurrent, that kind of unfortunately for them has run through over the last 2 or 3 years, they will just, I think they'll head for the gate. So, and hopefully, I think that's what will happen. Ulster, I've got huge amount of respect for Les Kiss. I think, my involvement with him when I was involved in around the Irish camp when he was in charge with Tech and Kidney, I think he's an excellent coach. And I think, they need to, like that, they've put everything in place off the pitch. The stuff, it all has to start coming out on the pitch, and they need results like that. I think La Rochelle are probably going to go ahead and win this game, but it's going to come down to the Ulster win over the weekend, and then they're going to have to go to Wasps. They do a job on Wasps, and I think they'll probably get out as maybe a runner up. So I think this is a stepping stone, and they get a try early. It could be a 5-pointer for them, which would really put them in a good spot for that second place.
Absolutely. We'll have to see what happens with Ulster over the weekend. You would fancy them to get the job done, as Johnny says. We'll ask you, gents, for your predictions in a moment. We do first have a clip of Cian Healy, who spoke to us during the week about facing Exeter again and the task that is. So here's Cian.
They're a bloody good team. Like they're gonna get back into the game and they're going to put you under the pump. Like it's about how we respond to that, I suppose, and try our best to not give them opportunities to make us have to respond. If we can be going after them for the whole game, that's ideal. But it's more than likely they're going to get a bit of a purple patch in a game and have a couple of pops off you. And if we can have defence well structured and counter attack well structured to get us back into solid platform or field position, then we know what we've put together off the field is linking up nicely. I think there's a lot to come. We didn't really have to play any of our plays or anything like that. It was just a bit of a dogfight and carry up the guts. So you know, we've a lot of crafty stuff to take out of the bag. So given the opportunity, I'd say the lads will be able to unlock that. There's a dangerous sense of security I think some teams can fall into from beating a team, and then that, I suppose, that little kick you get when you do get beaten, it's a big thing for the whole week. If you get beaten in the first one, it burns pretty hard, and you have that opportunity to go after a team. We're well aware that we've been in that position before, and you know, such a close game, it really cuts out any kind of confidence to just sit on our performance. Like we've to really look to improve this week, and we're looking after our bodies today and doing the mental side of the work, and tomorrow we'll get pretty physical in training, I'd imagine.
So Leinster have a little bit more in the tank, reckons Cian Healy, echoing a lot of your own sentiments there, Johnny. We might get a couple of predictions from you. Let's start with that Leinster game. You reckon they'll get the job done, but it might be a little bit closer, a little bit tougher than it was at Exeter last weekend.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty close for 70 minutes. I think they'll probably just pull away towards the end, but I think it'll probably be something around maybe an 8-9 point game. But I think a much improved performance from Exeter. And I think it's going to be the game of the weekend.
What about Munster then against two of your former employers, I suppose, at Welford Road? How do you reckon that one's going to go this weekend?
It's going to be very tight. I think Tamua and Manu in the centres just give them a different element, and also people will probably be looking at Mike Williams' inclusion at 7. He wasn't playing last week. He's an out-and-out 7 Kiwi guy that probably should have had a bit of more recognition back home. But I think I'm going to sit on the fence in this one and hopefully go for a 44-all draw.
You're killing us. And Ulster, you reckon Ulster will get the job done right at home?
Yeah, look, I think that will hopefully be an easy weekend for them. Start well, get a try early, and then I just think, look, Quins, they've been great side over the last couple of years. I just think they're a shadow of their former selves since Conor O'Shea left, and I think they're old. They're going back to their old habits. I think there's a bit of a soft underbelly amongst that team, so I think they're going to struggle a small bit.
Ryan, the tiebreaker, 44-all draw at Welford Road, or how do you see it going?
Yeah, it's going to be very, very tight.
Don't you start that as well.
No,
it will be tight. It will be tight.
Leicester are going to obviously come back. They're going to come back extremely hard. They're hurting. We know they're hurting. There's a bit of vengeance in the air there, and it's a huge game for them. It's must win. They're going to have to win it to keep their campaign alive. Munster have spoken, actually. Billy Holland and Conor Murray both separately have spoken about it. Obviously in the context of the group, the pool, it's a huge game for both teams, but for Munster's season, they've both spoken about this game as being huge because it's seen as this, last season they put a few decent performances, one-off performances under Rossi together as they got to the semi-finals, but this year they want to kind of build on that and show that they've developed and progressed, and if they can go to Welford Road, I think Leicester have only lost twice at home at Welford Road in the last 36 European games, so you can go there and you can back up last week's performance with another one. That puts them in a great position in the pool, in the absolute driving seat. I'm going to go for Munster by 3 points tomorrow, or on Sunday.
Well, I'll take that. Johnny, thanks a million for joining us. Best of luck with, I suppose, getting a bit of sleep over the next 12 or 13 years. But we're delighted for you anyway. Congratulations. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Best of luck with the hangover, lads. Get some potassium, get a couple of bananas into you there throughout the day. Hopefully,
it's going to be a battle. Every moment's a battle in here. But we'll persevere. Cheers. Nice one, Ryan.
Cheers.
Good luck, Gav.
And to all of you at home as well, cheers for watching. Enjoy the rugby over the weekend. We will be back this time next week. And until then, take care. And thanks to Air Sport as well. I forgot that. That's the hangover. Thank you very much, Air Sport. But yeah, cheers, enjoy it, and we'll chat to you next week.